I'm actually really happy to be here today, and I'm hoping that you can learn from my mistake so you all don't make the same one. So when I got into it, I had two goals in mind. The first was to help the company deliver experiences that would delight our customers, and the second was to make user experience a key part of our leadership function. And when I looked at what I had to do, it seemed pretty straightforward. I felt like I had a really clear path to go on. What I really needed to do was develop those relationships and the credibility with our most senior leaders. And I also needed to create a burning platform. And so I started to go about my job. And it wasn't actually that difficult, because it turns out the experiences we had at the time, the actual experiences we had, were not the ones we actually wanted to have, or even the ones we thought we had, right? So it was pretty easy to show the difference. It was pretty easy to talk about the short-term effects on revenue, the longer-term effects on the revenue and the brand. I worked very closely with my chief marketing officer, got him really excited, got my chief technology officer really excited, got Scott Cook, our founder, excited. They worked with me to get actually Steve Bennett, who was our CEO at the time, to be excited. He invited me into his staff meeting for an hour and a half. You know, we talked about this. GMs were on it. He decided to make this a core section of his leadership offsite for the top 3% of the company. You know, I worked with my CTO and my CMO to craft it. It was about an hour and a half. It was the most well-received part of it. When our CEO went around the company, this was the bulk of what he was sharing with the rest of the 97% of the organization. Okay? So I was feeling really good. Then I started to meet with our GMs one-on-one, and they would say to me, okay, I get it. We have a problem. What am I supposed to do? Okay. I, of course, had the answer. So the answer was, you need a user experience leader reporting in on your staff, and you need the designers to be up-leveled in the organization, and you need to make sure that they can either give a go, no-go decision on that experience being released, or at the very least, they need to be able to state whether or not they support this release, and if not, why. The product manager may make a decision to release it anyway, or the marketing person, but at least they'll be making a deliberate decision. Okay? I thought these were very rational, very reasonable expectations. So when I made those recommendations, I got looks like this, right? And it was like they kind of looked quizzical, and it sort of seemed like they didn't understand me, and we talked about other things, and they were much more excited about other ideas had that I found far less exciting. So when I pushed on it again, and still nothing happened, right? Not one designer was given that authority. Not one GM hired someone from user experience to be on their staff. I pushed harder. And what I realized is the reason they didn't take me up on that recommendation is they couldn't imagine having designers in those leadership positions. They couldn't imagine that the designers we had, or that they had seen at other companies, would be capable of operating at that level. So what I realized then is that in addition to the other issues we had, we also had a brand problem. So I actually found this somewhat ironic, because who thinks about brand? We do, right? We think about brand all the time. The problem is we think about brand when it comes to our customers and their experience with our brand. But we're not thinking about people's experience with us and with the members of our teams. And our brand and our team's brand comes from every interaction people have with us. How quickly did they respond to that email? Were they accretive in that meeting, or did they come across as if they were resistant? Right? Every opportunity they have is an opportunity to make or break it. All right, so basically, we started to do a deep dive, and I went around the company with some other clever people that I have the fortune to work with, and we dug into what is the brand of user experience at Intuit. And we talked to our designers, and we talked to our researchers, and we talked to product managers, and to product developers, to marketers, and to leaders. And the good news is, it was very consistent. Right? And the bad news is, it wasn't entirely positive. Right. And I think this phrase, actually, by the way, tell me about, is a really important phrase. I actually get phone calls all the time with people basically saying to me, hey, tell me, what do you know about Kate? Right? And I say, probably the top 3 things that come to mind. That's her brand. All right. So these are some of the brand attributes that we had at Intuit. Probably many of these are true of your teams as well. So, you know, everybody felt pretty good about this, right? We also had some not so great brand attributes. So difficult, slowing teams down, being narrowly focused on the experience, not thinking about the broader business. Being prima donnas, that was a common one. And being complainers, also very common. And when I looked at this and I thought about why those GMs who were so hot and so good to go were quizzical when I suggested putting the designers further up in the hierarchy and getting design leaders on their staff, I realized that it all made a lot of sense. Right? So once we figured this out, we, of course, had to fix it. So I think what's important is when you look at the brand of user experience overall, it's really the collective brands of every single one of those flowers or every single one of those people on your staff. But when you're going about to fix that brand or to improve that brand, you really have to focus on one person at a time. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So we use primarily two different levers to make this change happen. First is we do focus a lot on personal brand transparency. So my general sense of brand, at least in my company, is that everybody knows what you're good at and what you're bad at. Right? It's just a question of whether or not you know it. So we've done a series of activities. So for example, in one group, we had the designers and researchers who work fairly often together come together in a room, and there were about 8 of them. Everybody had a stack of index cards, and we would go around. We'd say, okay, Kim, let's write down 3 good things about her and something that's not so great about her brand, right? Let's go to the next one. Let's go to Brandon, right? Do the same thing for Brandon. After everybody had written out cards for each person, we walked around, put them on the people's tables. Each designer or researcher then had a stack of cards. They did their own card sort activity. How perfect is that, right? Their own card sort activity, figured out what they were good at and not so good at. And they could tell by the stack of the cards which ones were the most common. Then everybody reported out and said, you know, okay, let me tell you. Here's what it looks like I'm really good at. Here are some things looks like I'm not doing so great at. And, you know, here's the one that I'm really interested in focusing on. And let me tell you, this one was a surprise, and I disagree with it because I'm not defensive, right? Or something similar. And so in that way, we tried to start making that personal brand transparent. And obviously, you have to have trust. You have to be thoughtful about how you do it. You have to be selective in who you include, especially at first, to make sure it feels okay, because it can be kind of scary. So second thing we did is really spending a lot of time minding that gap. So there are a lot of ways in which we do this. Part of my job is to lead calibration of all of our designers and researchers across the company and to create, you know, with a bunch of other people, the job profiles. So the key attributes of the brand that we wanted to be in there are now part of the job profiles. That is something we visit every time we do calibration, which is every 6 months. Aspects of the brand actually go into people's goals. You don't want to focus on more than 1, possibly 2 pieces at a time. And we dig down deep into the actual behaviors that cause people to feel as if you are defensive, for example. This is actually a constant battle. There are several very senior, fantastic architects that report directly to me. About 3 weeks ago, I got a call from one of the executives they were working with, and this person said to me, basically, don't worry, the names are fictional, you know, Jen was great, but at one point she started advocating so heavily, it was like she couldn't hear. At that point, she stopped adding value to the conversation. And I said, okay, great. Thanks for the feedback. I'm going to pass it on. So I gave her a call, and I said, look, here's the feedback. You know, we've talked about this before. You're so great at so many things. This is one little piece that sometimes gets in your way. Would you mind if we use this as a learning experience for the other architects that are on the team? And she's very mature, and she said, yeah, no problem. So 2 days later, I had everybody come into a room. And once again, they brought with them, here are the 3 things I absolutely love about working with this person. And here are the 2 things I think get in their way. So we went around the room. We didn't actually do index cards. It wasn't anonymous. These are senior enough people who are comfortable and trust each other enough that they could go at it in a different fashion. And we shared it. And not surprisingly, there was a lot of consistency around the room. Each person chose one thing they really wanted to work on and gave everybody else in that room a way to let them know when they were veering into their bad territory. So in this case, Jen, fictional name, said, okay, when I start to do that, just pull me aside and say, you know, you're advocating too hard. And I'll get it, and I'll be able to step back, because when I'm in that moment, I don't even know I'm there. Right? So by doing that, she's going to look better. Her partner is going to look better. the other feedback I got from the executive is, why the hell didn't her partner, rein her in? My team looks better, and design it into it looks better, right? So it's these small micro moments that really add up. But it's being constantly vigilant. On the other hand, it's also a lot of fun, and I think it's a core part of helping your people develop. All right, so my big learning is you've got to own this brand. My story actually ends in a fairly happy manner. When I started into it, our designers and our researchers reported into first-level managers, some of whom were product development managers, some of whom were marketing managers or product managers. Others reported into first-level user experience managers, who then reported into second-level managers, often of product development, marketing, or product management, who reported into directors, who reported up. Nowadays, we actually do have a user experience leader reporting on a GM staff. And our other user experience teams are all reporting at least into the VPs of product management or product development. But again, we wouldn't have gotten there if we hadn't been watching our brand. Didn't get us there all the way, but boy, did it sure help. So that's my lesson.